modes of transportation. You want to keep your ship going as much as possible, and you also want to utilize the port infrastructure as much as possible. It does not allow for one owner, such as we have in the Apple case, for example, and it is also building up on episodic interactions. One of the biggest challenges that we have associated to ports is that the stakeholders of the ports experience too low predictability. And I was highly engaged in running and co-founded also what was called the Port CDM, Port Collaborative Decision Making concept, which was basically about different actors sharing situational awareness. We ran that concept for in testbeds in 13 ports, and basically what we saw that is only about 40% of the time that value is provided to the visitors. The rest is waiting times. So what is the need? There are some winds of change blowing. We need to be able to connect what happens at sea with what happens at shore. We see a lot of things going on in relation to remote operations, enhanced predictability of movement and operations along the whole transport chain, increased information transparency with direct and indirect stakeholders, seamless integration with the multimodal transport chain. There is an emerging debate at the moment between engaged scholars and reflective practitioners talking about how digitalization actually can bring value to the maritime sector that is coined under maritime informatics, and is also approaches being established to upgrade the human capabilities within digitalization. So a strong focus at the moment is just-in-time operations driven by standardization, collaborative alignment, meaning that different actors are aligning to each other, and the utilization of the appointment economy. Unfortunately, as we saw, for example, in the Suez Canal blockage, it is still so that very many passengers and also port calls are handled by first come, first served, are coordinated based on the physical arrival rather than introducing some kind of slot management system. And what is the need? We need information sharing communities, both on the local level within the port, but also connected to authorities as well as horizontal communities. And you see, for example, trade lanes as one example of a horizontal community. Even IMO is now highlighting very importantly that digital data sharing is key to actually respond to the environmental concerns that we have there. What I did was that I asked one of my colleagues to actually produce me a video to show how things are looking in the Atlantic Basin. And I think that was pretty interesting to see that there is a lot of ships, and the blue arrows are the ones that are showing us a little bit the larger ships, and the green ones are more are smaller ones. But you see here that there is a lot of traffic going south of England, but there are some traffic also going in the Irish Sea, so to say, and of course there is a track over to the US side here. And the thing is that there are a lot of congestions arriving here in different ways, and those congestions needs to be forecasted, and the ones that we are serving in the shipping industry, we as ports, we as shipping companies, we as agents, etc., need to be able to forecast and say how and when will the clients that we serve actually be those services be fulfilled. The way that we are conceiving this, and this is an ongoing debate that is happening a lot now, is to conceive the port as sustainable and smart. By doing that, it is addressed of looking at the port as a multidimensional hub, both as a transport hub, which would put the light to the efficiency, challenging the stevedore arrangements, ensuring that the throughput is made as fast as possible, and or that the stock management which some ports are establishing. Also, the port as an energy hub, which would enable us to secure a situation where we both run the operations inside the port by good means of energy, but also as a driver for the green conversion. And here I think that there will be very big opportunities for the different ports of the world to actually establish unique capabilities in relation to that the fleet will be changed within the next 10 years, where we will see new engines and so on coming up, and thereby requiring different types of energy, and also as an information hub. And given the perspective on being an information hub means that information or digital information is going to be key to actually coordinate those operations. Port calls, train calls, truck calls, but also the provision of energy in different ways. We see now also that there are things happening such as smart containers and intelligent cargo. That means that the port would have an opportunity to provide new information and situational awareness to the different stakeholders of the port and the ones that are utilizing the whole maritime ecosystem or transport system. So what has been done is actually to push, and I've been together with some colleagues here very instrumental in pushing a discourse on what is called maritime informatics, and there are now very strong attention directed to this from many different nations, becoming an arena for how we can increase the efficiency, safety, ecological sustainability, and resilience of the world shipping industry, where we need to ensure that we are boosting the collaboration among the different partners. So what is the need? The need is to enhance predictability enabled by standardized data sharing, to enhanced predictability enabled by situational awareness, and also data-driven decision making. And in the latter point here, we see a lot of machine learning, AI applications coming forward. And the key is to balance capital productivity for the different involved organizations at the same time as we are also boosting the energy efficiency, which becomes then a societal and planetary concern through ecosystem collaboration. So as a final point, what I see is that we are walking from a very fragmented situation when it comes to situational awareness to rely our decisions on common situational awareness, from low information quality to high and reliable information quality, from lacking planning horizons to predictable operations, from unstructured information exchange to standardized data exchange, from suboptimized operations to a more mature collaboration culture, unnecessary waiting times to just-in-time operations, and also from low IT maturity to enhanced IT systems and third-party innovation opportunities. And interesting to see is that the ecosystem of maritime transport is opening up now. We see hackathons happening with a lot of inspiration for how the ports of the future would look like, for example. So this was my elevator pitch of how to look upon a perspective on how to look upon the future ports. So 10 minutes. Thanks a lot.
Michael, thank you so much for that wonderful explication of what digitalization means. Albeit at a conceptual and theoretical level, it's still deeply rooted in practice, and we can see that. So I remember reading one time that there is nothing quite as practical as a good theory. You know, you have to do the sort of theoretical work behind the scenes, and it's great to see that that is being done, and it's great to see the command that you have of that entire subject. What a pity we haven't got longer to hear from you, but maybe we can tap into your knowledge again at some time. Thank you very much indeed, indeed, Michael. So we are now going to head into our second panel discussion. So without further ado, I will hand back to you, Adele.
Thanks, Liam. Yes, I'm not. Oh, sorry. Now I think you can see me now. Thanks, Liam, and thank you, Michael. That was a fascinating presentation. And, you know, I think that there's so much different activity in the maritime sector when you talk about digitalization and different projects, that it's really good to get that snapshot overview of you on really where things stand. And I certainly would love to to explore that a little bit further. So hopefully we get the opportunity maybe at another time to go through some of the points that you mentioned there. We're now moving into the second panel. So our first panel really focused on the user's perspective. So we heard from 3 of the ports. And our second panel now is looking at the future. So the future of digitalization in ports. And we're going to hear now from, we've 2 companies here who are at the cutting edge of technology that is being employed in this regard. And we have 2 other speakers that are very much at the cutting edge of thought in this sector. And we have Nuno Marques, the CEO of Wavecom in Portugal, and Mr. João Martinez, the CEO of Calido, Mr. Richard Clayton, the Chief Correspondent in Lloyd's List, and Mr. Frank Jensen, the IT and Trade Facilitation Senior Expert in Circle. And Frank has a long career with the European Commission previous to his current role, and has a lot of expertise in terms of customs and, you know, digitalization in terms of trade facilitation. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from our 4 panelists today. Similar to the first session, each of them will provide an overview, and then we will move into the discussion session. So I'd like to invite Mr. Nuno Marques, from the CEO of Wavecom, to give your 5-minute overview first. Nuno, can you hear me okay? Do we have Nuno?
Yes, I'm here, sorry.
No problem. Great.
I'm trying to share my screen, but yeah, I can do it.
Great, thank you, Nuno. I can see your content coming up now. So great.
Okay, thank you. So let me just, let's start. So we are Wavecom. We are a telecommunication company from Portugal. We are now 20 years old. Okay, so we are a grown-up company, and we work in ports since, I don't know, 2012 or something like that. We have a big project in port of Algeciras in south of Spain. It's not Atlantic port, but I think is a good reference and also very close to the reality of Atlantic ports. So as I said, we do technology. Okay, this is something that we do. We do Wi-Fi, we do microwave links, we do critical and communication for voice and data. We do real-time location systems where you can locate assets or people. We also do smart transportation applications and technology. We do smart port, of course, that's why we are here. We do smart cities, and the first panel that we listened this morning, we can see the interaction between ports and cities, because as was stated prior, 80% of the Atlantic ports are near or inside cities. So it's very important to have data and sensorization, like we see, like we're going to see in the next slides, not only in port but also in city, and try to understand the influence between the city and the port, and the port and the city. So about communications, we do everything that I think a port needs to have a good layer of communication that is mandatory to have to build up the digital transformation upon this layer, this infrastructure layer of communication. So we do 4G and 5G nowadays on private network on port of Algeciras. We did a big project, and we are in the big project of 4G, of private 4G. We also have a huge coverage, full coverage of Wi-Fi. Now we're trying to, it's not Wi-Fi 6 right now, it's Wi-Fi 5, but we are trying to promote it to Wi-Fi 6, if you can say so. It is important to have a ubiquitous network, like we're going to see on the next slides. We do critical communication, that voice critical communication that or emergency communication that normally ports use. We also do IT networks and sensorization and tracking and real-time location. About critical communication, as I was saying, we do PMR, DMR, Tetra, and 4 and 5G private networks. Nowadays, mainly 4 and 5G private network. I think that will be the future, because not only you can have voice, that is mandatory, but also you can have video. And sometimes in emergency situation and normal operation, video could be helpful more than words, and just only words. About the communication, we can divide this in three layers. That has to do with what you want to communicate between machine to machine, man to machine, man to man, etc. So we have the first layer that you can have is LoRaWAN, is a new standard, is a machine to machine protocol. You can communicate between sensors and machines that are getting the data from that sensors, or to activate or to put in place some jobs made by machines to be triggered by this trigger on this IoT layer of LoRaWAN. LoRaWAN is an open protocol, so you don't need license, and it can be used across Europe or across the world. Then you have private 4G and 5G. 4G, everyone knows. 5G, someone knows. It's a new standard of mobile communication. You can have video, you can have voice, you can have internet. And then you have Wi-Fi 6, for instance. You have a coverage of Wi-Fi 6, you have more density, because as you can see on this graph, LoRaWAN, probably you need 1-2 base stations per port. On private 4 or 5G, maybe you need 5, 6, 10 base stations. On Wi-Fi 6, you need, like, I don't know, 100 or 200 access points to cover the same area. As this is an image from Aveiro Port. We are a company from Aveiro.
1 minute to conclude.
Okay, I'll try to be as quick as possible. As you can see, you can have these areas of coverage. On real-time location, we can locate assets, we can locate people, and we can do this on real time and deliver it to a proper platform that can be used by all the stakeholders on the port, including, for instance, the city, if you want. About sensorization, we can do sensorization on air, on traffic, on parking, on energy, on waste, on plagues, if you have that, not COVID, of course, and on beaches if the port authority has also authority on closest beach. On smart waste, all of these sensors, we can produce data, and this data can be delivered to all the stakeholders of a port. The new ports, the ports are logistic hubs, okay? But if you have digitalization, if you put digitalization on a port, you can be also a tech hub, a digital hub, because you are in a crucial point of the economy. And so you can use not only logistics to communicate and to interact with the rest of the society, but you also can use technology to do that. We have a lot of applications that you can use on sensorization, and Wavecom is a 100-guy company here in Portugal. Nevertheless, we do projects all over across the world. We do have a project in Spain that I was talking about, Algeciras, in Italy, in UK, but also in places like Brazil, Mozambique, Jamaica, and even China. If you have any questions about the technology and the way that we can think that technology can improve the operations of ports, please feel free. This is
Thank you,
welcome. Thank
Nuno.
you.
Thank you, Nuno. That's an excellent overview of some of the technologies that are being used to transform the industry. And I'm really looking forward to discussing that more in our panel session. Thank you, Nuno. Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Joan Martinez, who's the CEO of Kaleido. Joan, oh there we are. So Joan, has been always working in logistics, but is really the driving force now behind the innovation strategy in Kaleido. So really looking forward to hearing about that, Joan. The floor is yours.
Okay, sure. So, hi everybody. I'm Kaleido CEO. Kaleido is a European global logistic operator. We have different offices and investments in 6 countries over 4 continents. Of course, we are handling around 4 terminals, but we are freight forwarders. We are logistic center operators, inside logistic providers, and so on. So innovation is a critical part of our activity, and that's why we have a spin-off called Kaleido Tech. It's an independent company, 100% focused on innovation, particularly with the open innovation approach. So, of course, we have different kind of products like the forklift float, magnet foam, or block lasher, kind of hardware, we can say, looking for lashing, cargo lashing systems, cargo protection materials, or ancillary equipment in order to optimize port operations or logistic operations. But today we are talking about digitalization, so I must be focused on the kind of things we develop. You can see here some of our solutions portfolio, not only these 4 solutions, but we are running already digitalization projects, of course, asset optimization, visibility and predictability tools like freight intelligence, or artificial intelligence, artificial vision solutions too. Of course, our first aim is to be competitive, productive. So the kind of things we are developing are because of improvements we need to develop. But of course, more and more we are building new digital solutions together with our clients worldwide. So you can see here important achievements. We are not only taking advantage within Kaleido, but even we are selling these kind of solutions even to our competitors, not only to our clients. So it's quite a paradox, but is running quite well up to now. The most important part I would like to share with you is not the solutions. It takes time, and I think that is not so relevant today, but is the open innovation ecosystem we are running. We are starting in San Francisco, California in 2015, opening the first accelerator focused on transport and logistics. At the same time, we are starting to work with Volkswagen Group, Lufthansa Cargo, Ingram Micro, and other guys. Actually, we are running our own open innovation ecosystem, our own accelerator, and we have extremely close to the market approach, a real approach, running projects with private funding, just a little bit with public funding from time to time. We need to be quick, extremely close to market, as I said before, and we are selecting the right partner at the right time, depending of the project. So considering project by project. That's it. I think we are running a little bit out of time, so I would like to offer all our knowledge, ideas, opinions later on. So thanks all of you for the time.
Thank you, Joan. That was a fantastic introduction to Kaleido, and looking forward to discussing it in the panel. So our next speaker is Mr. Richard Clayton, who is the Chief Correspondent with Lloyd's List. So Lloyd's List is one of the world's oldest journals, and Richard covers digitalization and human element issues in shipping. And this interest was sparked by his by discussions around autonomous shipping. So Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adele. It's really interesting from the shipping perspective to see how many of the same issues are being raised within the port community. However, I think one of the points that Michael Lind made, that we need to connect what happens at sea with what happens on shore. It just isn't being done adequately at the moment. So I have three opening thoughts and one concern that I'd like to share with you. All of these have already been raised, interestingly. The first thought that I had was that digitalization is not a goal in itself, it's a tool, which is exactly what Isabella Rickbos said right at the beginning. And certainly from the shipping perspective, and I hope not from the port's perspective, the ship owners are being encouraged to see digitalization as an end state, bit like decarbonization. This is the target that we need to end at. And of course it isn't. It's a tool. It's a way of becoming more efficient and more sustainable. And I think until you encourage ship owners to see that there's a financial aspect to this that benefits them, then they'll not exactly be quick in investing in digital processes. The second point relates to something that Paul O'Regan made in his presentation, that at the top of the agenda must come people. And certainly in the shipping sector, it does appear that we see digitalization as a way of removing or reducing people from ships' crews. It shouldn't be that at all. What we've got is now a plethora of data, and that data is analyzed, and the analysis of that data gives us insight that we need to take decisions, and it's people who take decisions. So we might have to reskill some of the people at sea and on shore, but the object must not be just to remove people from the equation. I think the third point I'd like to make is a point that Michael Lind has already made, that the whole digitalization process is still far too fragmented. And I think part of the reason for that is that we've got two groups of companies creating our digital landscape for us. We have the technology providers who have put together an ecosystem in which they provide all the elements. So you have to buy into that ecosystem. But on the other side, we have startups, dozens of startups, each of which have one great idea that they claim will revolutionize the whole industry. And the problem is they're not talking to one another. I think over the past 2 or 3 years, there has been a trend for an understanding that the technology providers can't provide all of the digital capability that we need. So they are acquiring some of the startups which can fill in the gaps in what they have to offer. And some of the startups indeed are coming together and bringing together their knowledge and their expertise. So slowly there is a bit of an amalgamation, and we really do need that if we are going to take our digital journey forward. Now, the concern that I have, and I've written on this quite a bit in Lloyd's List, is in shipping, maybe in ports as well, but in shipping, the digital landscape is being created by technologists. They've got brilliant ideas, but how well do they know the shipping and the ports sectors? What I need to see is much more amalgamation between the technology people and the actual running of ships and the actual running of ports. When that happens, we'll be in a much stronger position. And I think only when that happens can we focus our education and training resources and get back to that human element that I'm so keen to encourage. Thank you, Adele.
Thank you, Richard. Some really interesting points there. And I think the people element that you mentioned is something really important that you mentioned Paul had touched on, and that, you know, really worth exploring a bit further, because often there is this view that digitalization is there to replace people, which is not the case. And when you talk about autonomous shipping as well, you know, there's a view that that's unmanned ships, when a lot of the time it is not unmanned ships, but, you know, more efficient use of personnel on ships, and that there is a need to reskill and other types of roles. And I think there's an understanding of that required in the industry, in terms of what exactly does that mean, and what does that exactly mean in the future of shipping. And that idea of bringing together technology and, you know, and the actual industry, so the technology providers and industry. So lots of interesting food for thought there for the panel discussion. Okay, so we'll move on to our final speaker of the panel, and before we move into the discussion. So our final speaker is Mr. Frank Jansen. Frank is the IT and trade facilitation expert, senior expert in Circle Group. And Frank is a well-known international expert and lead consultant in the domain of trade and transport facilitation and border management around the single window, streamlining of border procedures and e-commerce. And Frank has worked on these projects in a number of jurisdictions. So really looking forward to getting Frank's insight on this. And Frank has also worked for international organizations such as the World Bank, the IMF, and has been working with the European Commission in this regard as well. So looking at the EU customs processes. So really, really interesting background, Frank. So looking forward to hearing your overview.
Thank you very much, Adele, for your introduction, and also for the invitation to participate today at this interesting event. So, as we only have 5 minutes, I will immediately start with the content. So I would like to approach it from an angle which is, what challenges are we facing? The first one, I will highlight each of the 5 in a 1-minute presentation. First is the Brexit business environment, which we haven't digested now. We still have a lot of practical problems and papers to fill out. Second is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has pushed us to digitalization. Then the third one is the further need for transport and cross-border procedures to be more efficient and therefore to be digitalized. Then also we want to increase the efficiency of the interconnection of the sectors and also the industries, because a lot is still happening in silos. And then the last point, also mentioned by other speakers, is of course the sustainability, the what we call in Europe the Green Deal. Now, first of all, on the Brexit, as you know, there's a lot of practical difficulties, and one of the digital solutions for that, and which are now applied more and more in a number of countries, is instead of, for example, having all kinds of transit arrangements for goods to be supervised by the authorities by means of all kinds of declarations, is to have digital equipment which are based on number plate recognition, cameras and electronic seals and things like that, to create what we call a virtual customs corridor, or you could also call it a authorities corridor, because it's not only customs who use it, and that would make the trade between the EU on the land side and the UK, and then between the UK and Ireland, much more easy to use and cost friendly, because now there's a lot of guarantees involved which are very expensive. So a lot of technology and digitalization of the information can definitely help us a lot in reducing the cost and reducing the bureaucracy. Then second point is the COVID-19. There, the estimation of the cost is for this, for last year was 64 billion, and there has also been a drive to reduce the human intervention. So also there, digitalization is very important, and in practice, it comes down in a lot of the cases in our maritime environment to investing in port community systems and single windows, either maritime single windows or trade or logistics single windows, of a combination of it, which handle all of the information and where all of the stakeholders have immediate access to the information and can also act within the system. Last point on this is that between these PCSs or single windows, there is now more and more a trend to create trusted networks. There is the International Port Community System Association, who has, for example, created such a trusted network and which enables exchange of information between ports and therefore between stakeholders. And of course, that is all based on digitalization. Then another evolution is, I would say, a further drilling down in terms of the port community systems and the single windows, which now more and more become multimodal, as you can see on the slide on the left side below. It not only concerns sea, but especially air and also land, and more also rail, so that there is multimodal approach, all within a digital environment. But also important is that more and more additional services are linked to that, like banking, insurance, of course, finding transport, finding commercial partners. So these digital systems also become kind of a hub to find partners to have your end-to-end business being successful. So that is quite an important evolution. The slides which you see here are from the latest I would say materialization of that in Abu Dhabi, so in the United Arab Emirates, where they're doing this, but also Singapore has taken similar initiatives. Saudi Arabia does similar things. So this is definitely on the rise and therefore the future. And more on the European front, how now to make that all of that does not only work in a given port, but that at least at the European level, things can communicate with one another. So one initiative is the European Maritime Single Window Environment, which has as a goal to make these maritime single windows on the national basis now also compatible with one another. So that for the trade side, they can interact with these systems in the same way in all of the EU countries, and that will also reduce further cost and standardize the operations very much. A similar initiative exists for the European Customs Single Window Environment, where it is mainly harmonization between the pure customs and other authorities in the ports, airports, and at the borders, such as veterinarian officers, plant inspection officers, and others who are there. So to integrate and digitalize their functioning and information exchange. Then perhaps one of the last slides I have is a new initiative. It's called the Electronic Freight Transport Initiative, and that has as a goal in about 5 years' time to replace all of the paper transportation documents, which everything except maritime, so road, rail, and were not available also for air, but also inland waters, by replacing the paper by standardized electronic information exchange in the next year. So there it is forecasted that over the next 20 years, this will reduce cost by 27 billion euro. So it's a very important initiative where it's, I would say, very valuable that you are informed of it. And it will enable that the movement of goods in a multimodal way can exchange the information and make all of the transportation and regulatory requirements to be handled in an electronic way. So this is a regulation which has been voted end of last year and therefore will become reality. There's about 4 or 5 years of work on it, but it's a very important initiative for the future. And then coming to an end, the previous speakers have handled that, is the also being able to handle your business in a digital environment. So the example here is given the digital twin, where on your screen you actually can follow the goods. And this is also important for the authorities like customs and port authorities. They know exactly what is going on, combined then with a principle of know your customers, so or authorized economic operators, where the authorities will especially focus on unknown companies or companies who are known not to be compliant with the law, but those who are compliant and do regular business will have less inspections, less interference with their business. And this is being extended from the customs area to other areas, like we have seen the agricultural area. And there is a conference in about 10 days from now, which will discuss that also in an international environment. And there also, therefore, it will be standardized over several countries. And that if you're a trusted trader in one country, you will be it, of course, already in the whole EU, but there will also be mutual recognition agreements. If you're a trusted trader in Europe, you're also a trusted trader in China and in the USA. So therefore, these digital approaches and exchange of information on trusted traders is seen as very important. I think in 5 minutes, this is what I wanted to say, but I'm of course available for questions and for the panel discussions. Thank you very much, Edel and dear colleagues.
Thank you, Frank. And I certainly have lots of questions following that. That's been really informative. And I have earmarked a few questions for you there for the panel discussion from that. So thank you for that really, really excellent overview. Before we move into the panel discussion, I just want to comment on the last question from the poll. So Liz, I think you're going to share the results of the final poll.
Yeah,
audience.
It's coming up there.
Great, thank you, Liz. So the second question on the poll that we invited our audience to participate in was what you see as the principal obstacles to digitalisation in ports. So finance is a big issue there. Skills and ICT knowledge, clarity on policy and regulations in place. So availability of technology, we have nobody that felt that that availability of technology was a barrier. So it's actually how to implement the technology, financing it, and the clarity or policy on regulations in place. So interesting, some interesting comments there. So we'll go to our panel. So I'll invite you all to turn your cameras on. Anyone want to make a comment on that poll to start off with?
I can start about the ICT knowledge, which is probably the biggest barrier on that the participants on this poll point out. I think that Wavecom and companies like Wavecom can help it because in many cases the ports doesn't have that ICT knowledge that needed to put in place technology, but the companies can help them put in place that technology that is available, like the poll just point out. So private companies can also help not only delivering the technology, but putting in perspective the usage of that technology and the knowledge that our company, the type of Wavecom companies have to deliver this knowledge to the ports.
And just on that note, Nuno, can I just ask you, I noted during your presentation, you went through, different technologies that you're using, and, your company is at the cutting edge of technologies in terms of wireless networks and deploying those in a number of different environments. And for, as technology evolves and as ports or shipping companies make investments, what advice would you give? Because we see now we have 5G, what's going to be the next platform, that how do you future-proof your investments, or how do you make sure that, and it's like one of our panelists said earlier, that, for some of the smaller ports as well, that they may make investments that they have to know work for them. What advice would you give in terms of future-proofing your investments?
Well, that is a tough question, because as fast as the development of technology occurs, more difficult is to have a proven a future-proof investment. When we start 20 years ago, people were asking exactly the same question. This is a question that happens in every era. But in that time, we are looking about 10 years or something like that. And nowadays, we see that 10 years in technology, it's too far. For instance, 10 years ago, we are talking about 3G. Now we are talking about 5G. So in 10 years' time. So we just have, but something that you can filter is that new technology sometimes just to give you a little bit edge prior to older technology. There are more, but the steps are smaller. You understand? They are not big leaps as when the internet was introduced, for instance. Okay, that kind of leaps doesn't occur so much in the time. So if you buy, for instance, and taking your example, a 5G private network probably will last like 10 years, okay? Nevertheless, in 3 years' time or 5 years' time, we're talking about 6G or whatever, you understand? But you can use the same technology because the problems are almost the same. So you can keep using that technology through the years. You have to know what there is in the market and trying to understand what fits more for your needs.
And just as a follow-up to that, can I ask, with new technologies like 5G, where you've much greater bandwidth and you have much more flexibility in the types of information that you can share, are you seeing businesses requiring new applications, or what do you see as the future applications of the technology?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to center a little bit more in telecommunications because it's what we know. You have 5G, for instance, which have huge bandwidth. You can have streaming. You can do whatever you want. And in the other end, you have IoT technology, like for instance LoRaWAN. When you have very small data, because we are talking, it's machine-to-machine telecommunications or communications, and we just want to see what temperature it is. It's open or close a window or whatever it is that. So it's less information. So you need other types of technology. So the future is not only in faster and bigger and more, but sometimes less, because one of the problems is energy, okay? And if you have multiple sensors, thousands of sensors in the port scenario, for instance, you need to be autonomous, energetically autonomous. So you need to consume as less as possible, and less sometimes is more difficult than more. And so we have also cutting edge technology to just saying that it's 25 degrees and you need to open your air conditioner or whatever. Okay.
Great, thank you, Nuno. That's excellent. Just to move on to you, Joanne, can I just ask you about, so we're talking about these cutting edge technologies, and as more technology is available, there's more of an opportunity to apply them in the context of ports and logistics, and that's something that Kaleido do in terms of innovation. So can you talk to me a little bit more about how you drive innovation? So from your company's perspective, you bring lots of different collaborators together. Can you talk to me about how that model may be applied in other contexts? How open innovation can be applied in the context of ports and shipping companies, do you think, that are looking to innovate?
Yeah, it's a long path. At the end of the day, we think that common sense is, coming to basics, right? We have a kind of methodology, open innovation methodology in Calero. And of course, we try to identify pain points in order to tackle. And that's why I'm totally agree. I mean, innovation is not the objective itself. It must be a tool, meaning digitalization or whatever, you know. So we need to identify first the thing to be improved. Secondly, we need to build a team. If it's an internal team, it's okay. If we have a lack of knowledge, we need to look outside the company, and we do. Now, the partnership is extremely important. We need someone with a culture close to us, with knowledge, dynamic, and extremely close to market. So that's why it's so important to have private funding, not European funding or public funding, because the speed is not the same. The freedom you have in order to build a team is not properly, I mean, it's not 100% freedom, we can say. Of course, it's important to have your problem or client problem just on the center of the discussion. So, as I say at the beginning, it's quite a common sense attitude, but sometimes it's difficult to find. So.
And in that point as well, when you're talking about private investment, you know, these accelerator programs, accelerator models. So ourselves in Irish Maritime Development Office, we're partners in the ASPAN project, the Atlantic Ports Accelerator project, which is going to develop this model and accelerator network, you know, to bring together the innovators with the ports and the investors. You know, do you see those types of models as being particularly beneficial in terms of mobilizing some of that private sector investment?
We are trying to. I think that the model is improving slowly. The euro invested by a private company is more efficient than a euro coming from the European Union program. The gap, hopefully, is being reduced, and we are trying to do via or through ASBAM project and this kind of initiative. I think that it's extremely important to tackle such inefficiencies, we can say, because we need to move quick and we need to be efficient, of course. So that's a real challenge.
Great. Thank you, Joan. Richard, I just wanted to ask you about those poll results, and also, you know, Joan mentioned there about innovation as being a tool, and that's something that you mentioned as well in your overview when you talked about digitalization is a tool. It's not an end game for companies, and that we see that there is a lot of fragmentation still, and you have the, you know, the larger tech companies, and then, you know, the smaller startups not really, you know, collaborating, and we need that to happen more. What do you see as the big barriers from some of your, I suppose, conversations with shipping companies?
Do you know, the biggest barrier is the barrier of trust. We've got so much data here, but some of it is my data and some of it is other people's data. And I don't want to share my data in case you share it with somebody else. And that, to me, is the actual key here. In an ideal digital world, we would all be sharing the data with each other so that we could smooth out the bottlenecks and make everything work. But because I think there are some of my data that I would rather you didn't have, because you might use it against me. And I'm just, it was Paul, I think, who was saying it's taken 10 years to build an element of trust at one of these ports. We think of trust as something you can just plug in and then I will trust you. It doesn't work like that. You know, trust is one of those soft, not soft skills, but a soft attribute. So the more we can kind of work together and collaborate, the better it will be. But I think that one of the other problems we've got within the port community is that there's so many stakeholders. If there were far fewer stakeholders, it'd be much easier to get together in a room and say, this is how we'd like to work it. But because you've got the agency and the bunkers and the port authority and customs and border protection, they all have their own little, well, not little, but significant roles to play. We need to somehow get fewer parties or more parties working together so that this whole process works.
And do you see a role for the private and the public sector to work together? Or how do you think that could evolve?
Of course I do, but I think the innovation must come from the private sector, as one of the other panelists was saying. I absolutely agree with that. And it's often the smaller companies that haven't got the great burdens upon them that come up with the best ideas. One of the whole areas here, and maybe we'll go on to this later, is about how you bring the next generation into our industries. And I think this is one of those areas where they say, actually, we've got a real problem that we'd like you to help us with. Not the technology necessarily, that's the easy bit, but how can we make this data flow in a way that benefits everybody?
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about, the next generation, and, I think there's a piece of work to be done right at, from a school level as well to university level on the opportunities in the transport sector, particularly in the shipping industry, and that people see a career for themselves as well. People that are working and young graduates that are at the cutting edge of technology, that see themselves as having a career in this industry. I think we're certainly moving towards that, but we're certainly not there yet. And I think there still is a piece of work to be done there. The other thing is, when you talk about sharing data, we see some of the container shipping, particularly the container operators, coming together now, and around blockchain platforms and things like that. But there still seems to be a lot of disjointedness. You have, who's going to join my platform and who's going to join the other one. That it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. And I think, having that kind of standardized model is what will actually take the industry probably to the next level. And on that note, I want to come to Frank, because Frank, you mentioned a lot of areas in your presentation, and you spoke about the EU maritime single window, the EU customs single window, the EFTI. As a member state, where do you start? Where who takes charge of this at a national level, and how do we make progress? So we're talking about EFTI in 5 years' time. What do we need to be doing right now, do you think?
Well, the first thing I can say that this legislation is only approved when experts and national officials have met many times in working groups. There are lots of programs which finance these kind of meetings, and experts, they discuss for a long time, they make draft documents, then they agree on them, then they move on to the next step. So each of the ministries and the government agencies which are within that competence, they participate. Then there are joint meetings. If, for example, the maritime transport, and I say something, the border police needs to agree on something, but then they have joint meetings. And of course, with COVID, this has become a bit more difficult. It's all virtual, but all of this is going on. And what you have in principle for the important decisions, all of the EU countries participate in the meetings and in the decision making. In more technical things, they can volunteer, and maybe only half of them participate, and the others are observers, and they follow this. So all of that is definitely with participation of all of the countries involved, and of course they have their say in the decision making, and the agenda for implementation, the different deadlines are part of the decision. There is always a time plan, and they say what is mandatory and what is nice to have, so to speak. So that definitely, I know from experience, is well organized. And also, I should say that for the private industry, there are also trade contact groups, and like the maritime industry is very present in those groups. They study all of the proposals, they make comments and suggestions. I'm also involved in evaluation exercises of things which were decided a little bit ago. And then they are also interviewed on what are their findings, what went well, what was difficult, what is still open or not achieved in time, and why. So no, from that point of view, it's all happening. But yeah, for the large public, it may be a bit of a closed world, but I can assure you it's all there, and it's organized. And if people are unhappy, then of course they go to the members of the European Parliament or to the Commissioner, and they escalate this, and it is seen to it that they have their say.
And do you think, Frank, there's a step change? So, you know, the EU Maritime Single Window, the concept was introduced a number of years ago. But do you think there's a step change now in the ambitions at an EU level?
I think so, yeah. I think it's going forward, and I think it's emphasized then what I explained, the EFTI, which we digitalized the other types of transport, and it is clear that you must make the end-to-end transport from where goods are produced to where they are consumed, and they go over land and over sea, then they arrive and they go on land again. And this is not only a transshipment to another means of transport, but they also meet with a lot of regulatory obligations, because, for example, military goods, they can only move under strict control and so on. As we know, plants and animals are very strictly controlled. So for that, I think we're making progress. There are less silos, and there is more harmonization, so exchange of information is being done. This was also the goal of the European Maritime Single Window, to come to better exchange between the single windows, and especially the port community systems, because many single windows are based on port community systems which have evolved in extending their functionality. So I think the picture is gradually becoming more complete. As I said, it's another 5 years before it will work, and then it will probably be another 5 years before it will work everywhere. But we're getting there, and I think we're doing steps in the right direction. Yes.
And you mentioned Brexit and COVID in your presentation as well, and it's something we actually haven't really touched on in either of the panels. But do you think that COVID, you know, and well, Brexit as well, but you know, COVID has been a significant shock to the economy, and we've all had to change ways of doing things at every level in society, from healthcare to how you do your shopping. Do you think that COVID has accelerated the uptake of digitalization? Do you think it's, you know, it's caused another step change in the industry as such?
Yes, definitely. I'm more than 100% convinced of this. Before, I always had to make these presentations to convince people, because many were happy the way they did things, and you have to kind of sell it and convince them of the profits. Now it's the reverse. Everyone has understood with COVID, there was no other solution. You could not meet with people. It was dangerous to exchange papers and hand them from one office to the other. So everyone, over 3 months' time, became an adept of digitalization. And then the question was, how do we do it? And if you do it in your own environment, then you said, but how now do I do it together with other competent companies, partners, stakeholders, and so on? How do we do it together? And this is then the area of the harmonization and integrated digitalization. Yeah.
And just a final question on, you know, ensuring the information exchange with partners on the sea side and the land side, which will be really important. Do you think that's possible in a time-critical environment?
Yeah, I think of course, it's done step by step, but the advantage, I would say, of digital information is that it is instantly available to all of the stakeholders. I think there are, I would say, other issues then which pop up, like security and the need for profiles and access to information, that you can only access information on a need-to-know basis. Once the information exists digital and it is provided to a platform like a single window and which meets with the land side and the seaside, then the most important thing is that people who need the information and are entitled to the information have access to it, and that it's well protected, that the information cannot be changed, that then also, as there are intellectual property and there are economic interest, that only those who need to see it have access to it, and that it respects, as Richard has said, there are many players there, and you cannot just put everything in the open, because otherwise they will push out the middleman, so to speak. And of course, there are vested interests and there are traditions. So we try to help forward the business and to make it more efficient, but it's certainly not the first goal or not the goal at all. To prevent the participation. We think there is enough to be done for everyone. So it needs to be well organized, and security, unfortunately, is one of the main issues that we have to keep an eye on.
Thank you, Frank. There's a question that has come in from the audience that's related to that, and I'd be interested, to hear from some of our technology companies as well. But how do you tune the needs of the data economy with the protection of personal data of the various holders of the logistics chain? So how do we marry that? How, this idea that we need, data to make the logistics chain more efficient with the protection of personal data. And I think that and cybersecurity is going to be something that's more and more apparent in the industry. Does anyone want to give an answer to that?
I can start briefly. Say in Europe, there is this regulation which is called GDPR, which is on the intellectual property rights. It is a challenge that everyone knows. It's complex. It needs to be well managed, and the fines are huge. I think this is a new point of hesitation for companies to participate, because I forgot how much it is, but the fines can be, it's either 2% or 4% of your turnover, not of your profit, of your total turnover. So it's huge for shipping lines and port companies and so on. So, but it is there, and it's I would say it's a legal speciality in its own to assure it's there. So everyone involved and in these operations need to get legal advice on it. And if you're a big company, you need to have a data protection officer who knows this inwards out. And it's one of the most challenging things at the moment, for sure.
Thank you, Frank, for that. We're going to close the panel, but just any further comments from the rest of our panelists on that? Anyone want to make any final remarks?
I can add something. I think that all the technology that there is put in place right now produce data, of course, and this is the main issue. And the data should be handled carefully, but in the way that is provided to every stakeholders. I think that the point here is how to imagine that all the information is put on the data lake. Okay, is everything there? Nevertheless, even that the information is centralized in some way and then can be accessed by all the stakeholders. Nevertheless, should be put in place authentication methods that I only can access to the data that is relevant to me, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. It's only not about security, but also about be feasible to use that information. Because as I was talking about, if you put 10,000 of sensors in a port, that sensor sends an information per second or per minute, you have thousands of gigabytes of information. But for I don't know, a track holder company, it doesn't make any sense to know what is the monoxide, the carbon on the harbor, on the port, you see. So I think that you have to centralize the information, put in the vault, in the security place, and then to have authorization and authentication security done by the stakeholders to access to that information. That's, I think, is the issue.
Thank you, Nuno. And on that note, again, similar to the first panel, I could talk for a lot longer with you all, and but unfortunately we're at time. So I just want to extend my sincere thanks to you all, to Nuno Marquez from Wavecom, Juan Martinez, Kalido, Richard Clayton, Lloyd's List, and Frank Jensen from Circle Group. Thank you so much for your contributions today, and I'll pass you all back to Liam.
Thank you.
Paul, sorry, it's Paul we're going to now. Paul Brewster with a wrap up. So Paul is going to do a wrap up on some of the key outputs of the sessions today. Thanks, Paul.
Well, thanks very much, Adele, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I think like many of you, we've been taking lots of notes and really impressed with today's event. I think at the start of the workshop, Liam posed, I thought, a very interesting question. Can digitalization solve all our problems? And I suppose in particular on our current focus for ambitions for the sustainable blue economy and the Green Deal objectives, it's very relevant. I think everyone will agree the contributions from our speakers assembled for the workshop have helped enormously to explore this question, and also to help us identify some immediate actions we can take to accelerate progress. At the first session, we had some insights, some great insights from our ports, and just to capture some of those, I thought to start with the point that it's important to measure progress, to have metrics, to track what we're doing, and to take appropriate actions on this basis. And again, that leads on to the issue that some ports are more advanced than others, but I think we've seen some really good examples of where knowledge exchange and partnering can play a role to improve everybody and everyone across this area. I thought a great example of this was the logistics single window in Portugal. The advances they have made there are really relevant and something all of us can learn and progress from. And I think among that, a theme that went throughout, I thought, a lot of the discussions, that it's not just about the technology. Interoperable frameworks, legislation, governance are all probably more important than the tools. And we're all too aware of the role ports have in a multimodal system. Our ports are trade gateways, and many of the sort of customs regulatory checks take place in this environment. But as a consequence, I think our ports are a natural fit for a lead role in implementing community systems and single windows. The role of our ports in sectors, established sectors like fishing, automotive, and emerging sectors like offshore renewable energy, I think we saw some really good examples of where improving efficiency and productivity in our ports will benefit all these sectors, as well as our wider trading economy. Overall, I was really struck by the point about the need for collaboration between our small and large ports. That if we do end up with a divide between the sort of big players that can sort of finance a lot of developments more easily, then we'll have missed the opportunity. Sharing advances and teaming up to overcome funding barriers will be crucial to delivering the benefits across our ports in the Atlantic and in the EU. I think the second session that's just finished gave us a lot of food for thought and a lot to consider. We know that our maritime ecosystem poses some unique challenges, but equally for smart and sustainable ports, we need to think of it as a multi-dimensional hub: transport, information and energy. And I thought this was really insightful. We've seen some great examples of new applications, new business opportunities in the maritime sector, and indeed new products and services that maybe haven't been traditionally associated with maritime activities being introduced to ports, and this will help drive innovation. The need to connect what happens at sea, so our shipping sector and our port sector, and I think again this point that the financial benefits, there has to be a financial business case for using these new technologies and new tools. It's essential in shipping, but it's essential throughout our sectors. Some of the softer areas were highlighted, and again, I think the poll results there were really interesting. That we have digital tools to enhance decisions taken by people, I think was a really strong comment, and the skills element and related to that, building trust are going to be really important going forward. I think just some final points on that. We've seen some changes to our trading arrangements, and recovery from the pandemic, I think, has reinforced the need for accelerating our work on digitalisation. As we speak today, we've seen COVID accelerate digitalisation in all our lives, our Zoom calls and so on. And I've no doubt that it will have a similar effect on our maritime sector, on our ports. So I think to sort of wrap up, I know many of you will have been taking notes. I have three points that I've noted for myself in the work I do. I think the new CEF programme will open up opportunities to achieve the sort of scale and synergies that we've seen among Atlantic ports today, where we can bring forward valuable projects to improve the efficiency, productivity and sustainability of our ports and shipping sector. I think we need to continue to engage with ongoing developments. I know it's not all about technology, but we have to keep abreast of the technological advances. And I suppose the New Horizon Europe programme will present lots of opportunities in that regard. We again, cooperation throughout the Atlantic area will give us opportunities to share costs for pilot projects, and at the same time put us in a strong position to make that transfer from pilot projects to commercial rollout. And I think the overarching thing and themes such as building trust and developing skills, for me, that comes from continuing to support collaboration and cooperation among all our small and large ports. These two areas are sometimes presented as being conflicting with competition, but I don't think so. I think we can achieve a lot more through these activities, and ultimately we end up with increased levels of business opportunities for everyone to compete for. So again, I look forward to hearing about the activities that today's workshop will have stimulated with all of your areas, and continuing to engage with you all to identify activities that we can cooperate on. So thanks again for everyone's contribution. I will now hand over to Dimphna Keogh, the Atlantic Strategy Committee Chair, for some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm just checking, can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, Dimphna, we can see you and hear you.
Perfect, thank you. So colleagues, let me first of all begin and on behalf of the Atlantic Strategy Committee by thanking the presenters of our keynote addresses from DG Mare Reka, Ms. Isabel Reichbost and Professor Michael Lind. Thank you for your contributions and for taking the time to participate here today. I'd also like to thank all our panelists and everyone who attended, participated, contributed, and who have just observed and learned as I did today. Everyone's input is important, so thank you for giving generously of your time and your attention. Throughout the workshop today, I was reminded of a phrase I heard used at home throughout my years growing up, which was that every day is a school day, and it certainly was that here today. Digitalisation is a key word that is used a lot these days, and to gain an understanding for what it means in practical, real terms in the port sector has been an education for sure. Digitalisation as a tool and a key pillar of advancement. The challenges the sector faces, including cybersecurity and data protection, the need to build trust between the various stakeholders and actors, the interface between ports and cities, between ports and the connection between ports and research facilities, ports integration with the transport chain, maritime informatics, communications networks, sensor technology, data protection considerations, innovation ecosystems, investment opportunities, digital twin technology. The exploration of all of these concepts and challenges and ideas here today has been really informative, and in each of these topics could probably be worthy of their own workshop. I think it's evident that digitalisation has the potential to increase the efficiency, competitiveness, and connectivity of our ports infrastructure. And a major takeaway from today is also that the efforts being made under this, and indeed all pillars of the Atlantic Action Plan, transcend national boundaries, and the need for inclusivity and to bring along stakeholders and partners as we implement the goals of the action plan will be fundamental to its successful implementation. Today's work will contribute to building the solid foundation and setting the direction in which these goals will be developed and implemented over the lifetime of the action plan. And today has also highlighted the role that ports have in implementing the European Green Deal, assisting in our economic pandemic recovery efforts, and addressing the new EU landscape post-Brexit. This, as you know, is the first in a series of workshops that will be hosted by the Irish Pillar 1 coordinators, and many of the workshops will take place across the 4 pillars of the action plan and across the member states of the Atlantic Strategy Committee as we work through the various phases of implementation of the action plan. These workshops are essential elements in canvassing stakeholder feedback, as full participation and consensus is critical in delivering on the action plan and in the successful continued development of a sustainable blue economy in the Atlantic region. So congratulations, Liam and his team, Edel, Paul and Fiona, and also to Liz Gavin of the Atlantic Strategies National Hub, and to Alina and her team and the assistance mechanism for putting this event together. So again, Mila Buikos, as we say in Irish, thank you all for your contribution to the Atlantic Action Plan and the wider maritime sector, not just today, but every day. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dipna, for those closing remarks, and if I may say, for your continued support and enthusiasm and energy for this entire project, which is inspiring and keeps us all going. Before the workshop closes, I'd like to add my thanks to the thanks that Dipna has already expressed to the speakers and panelists, to Alina and her team in the assistance mechanism, to the task force that work alongside us, whose assistance was invaluable in structuring the workshop and in providing such expert speakers from your respective countries. I'd like to thank Liz Gavin, our National Hub, who's done such stellar work in her role and in the assistance she's giving in preparing for and running today's event. I, of course, would like to thank my own colleagues, Paul and Edel, who were terrific today, but also to say a word about Fiona Murphy, who is new in the IMDO and behind the scenes has been doing all of the hard work to make the rest of us look good. So thank you very much indeed, Fiona. And finally, I would like to thank our audience for participating. To remind you, as Dipna did, that there are 3 further workshops coming up in July, September and October, which will link into the event in Dublin that is being organised as Ireland comes to the end of its presidency of the Atlantic Strategy. So, obrigado e adios, merci et au revoir, gracias y adios. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye for now.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everybody.